So we have been tasked to talk about some women. Huh. What are we going to talk about today?
We're going to talk about some bad girls. What do you think? You can clap. It's all right.
Oh, they're showing the video. Oh. You don't have to show that, Aaron.
Show that video at all.
Bad girls, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when he comes for you? Bad girls, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when he comes for you? I bet none of you are bad.
No. You guys are obviously good people. I mean, you woke up and got all bathed for church and stuff. Look all clean and pretty. Y'all good people? You might be good. I think you're mostly good. But we all have our story, don't we? We all have our stuff. And I have some bad girls I'm so excited to tell you about because they were bad, but God has this amazing thread, this scarlet thread, that he carries through the lineage of Jesus using broken, bad girls. Now, if you're a dude and you're listening, you're like, oh, I'm off the hook. Oh, no. No. Tune in, dudes, because guess what? It's all of us. And not only are our bad girls, but there were some bad dudes involved in their bad girl stories that kind of sometimes got them there. So anyway, this is for all of us. And my first girl that I'm talking about today, her name is Tamar. Now, I'm all about words and names and stuff, so I was like, is it Tamar? Is it Tamar? So I was like all Googling and everything, and there was no consistency. Everyone had their own idea. So I'm saying Tamar, but if that bothers you, just in your head say, it's Tamar. It's all good. So who's Tamar? She's this chick in the Bible. Okay, we're starting super early in Genesis, and her name means oasis or prosperity. Pretty cool, right? That's good stuff. And wow, she's got some pretty bad stuff going on. She posed as a prostitute, seduced her father-in-law. This is church, y'all. I know you're thinking, this sounds a little rated R. It is, but it's church because it's in the Bible. So Tamar's thrilling tale is told to us in Genesis 38. And she is one unlucky bride with a trail of a couple of dead bodies, a.k.a. husbands. All right, guys, now you listening? Yeah, that's right. So what's up with Tamar? So she is chosen to be a bride. It's, it sounds good. It's kind of normal stuff. So Israel, a.k.a. Jacob, so his name was changed. Y'all know this, right? You read your Bibles? Yeah? Okay. So Israel, a.k.a. Jacob, has a son named Judah, and he's a pretty cool son in some ways. I mean, he's bad too in some ways, but he's pretty important because we know Jesus hails from the tribe of the Lion of... Oh my goodness, isn't that amazing? So Judah's this dude, right? He's this guy, but he's also a nation, which is awesome. And so God does these really cool things with these sons. So Judah was in Canaan. He had a Canaanite wife. Now, at the beginning of this, we know this means she's not Jewish. And that's kind of a bad deal for the Bible because God kind of likes to keep things pure and solid. So anyway, they have 3 sons. Judah's son, was wicked before the Lord, kicked the bucket. And then his younger brother, Onan, was forced to take Tamar. Now, there's this word called levirate, and her job, or his job, was to basically produce a son for his brother who's dead. Very strange. And I know, right? Like, who would even want to do that? Not me. I mean, that's awkward. But anyway, and I'm going to read the Bible because this is so awkward that I couldn't even just say it. So he said, so he's brought to Tamar to be this husband, right? And Onan knows that he's going to lose his entire double portion if Tamar has a baby because it's going to be his dead son's kid. What the heck? How does this happen? So what he does is Onan knew that the child would not be his, so whenever he slept with his brother's wife, he spilled his seed on the ground to keep from providing offspring for his brother. What he did was wicked in the Lord's sight. Guess what? Boom, dead. God killed him. He was like not messing around. He said, this is my law. This is my rule. You're dead. So Onan's dead. What is going on? And you know what? He's the jerk anyway. So, I mean, not that I'm the boss of that, but there's one son left and he's like a kid and his name's Shelah. He's like probably about 10. He's probably about Elisha's age. He's playing soccer and, hanging out with the kids, doing all the cool things. And he's about to have to be the next husband to this chick who has this trail of 2 dead husbands now. That's bad news for Judah because he needs his heritage to happen, right? He needs a son to have a son so that a legacy can continue. Well, without that, we wouldn't even get Jesus. So that's a problem all the way back. So what happens is Judah sends Tamar back to her father's house to be a widow. Now, she's smoking hot, she's young, and she does not want to be a widow. Why should she? I mean, she's gorgeous and she has a great future, but she has to obey the rules, and that's the way it goes. So she gets sent back to her dad's house, and she finds out that her father-in-law, Judah, remember Judah? He's going to be coming through town, and he has shirked his obligations. He has neglected to give her a husband. It was his duty. And he's coming through town with all his pals, and they're going to go shear some sheep. So I guess they have lots of sheep, and they're wealthy. But what he did is he left home without his American Express card, and he sees this hot chick at the end of the town. Well, Tamar had put a veil on and went to the end of the town. She looked kind of like a shrine prostitute, although she was not one. And he says to her, hey, girl, let's go, you know? And but he brought no money, and so that was a problem, too. And so she knows who he is. Now, mind you, she's bad, but she's good because her motive, her intention, and what matters to her is that Judah would not cease to have a legacy. She knows that they've cheated her, they've ripped her off. Judah has not done right by her, but her heart, I believe, was to see that children would come forth. And she also probably didn't want to be a widow. I mean, I wouldn't. But anyway, so well, they visit each other. We'll just leave it there. And so because he did not come with his American Express card, she says, you're going to have to leave for me something, a pledge. And he says, well, I'll give you a nice goat. And she's like, great, but you don't have the goat now. So give me your staff and cord, scarlet cord, and your seal. And that's basically like your driver's license and your American Express. It's good for me. And then when you come back with the goat, you can have your stuff back. Whew. All right, so what happens? She got pregnant. That's tricky because now she's a widow living in her dad's house and she's pregnant. And well, poor Judah, I mean, I don't even know what people are thinking. He doesn't have any identification. He can't do anything, can't go to the bank without that. So he sends his friend back with the goat to find that shrine prostitute, that chick at the end of town. And the people say, there's no such thing here. We don't even know what you're talking about. And the guy goes back and he says, Judah, I don't know. And Judah's like, we are going to be so humiliated by this. Let's just forget it never happened. We're just not going to worry about it. But then right after that, he finds out Tamar's pregnant. Now, this is bad news for him double. He's like, he doesn't know Tamar is that woman, but he says, bring her and let's just get rid of her. We got to stone her. We got to burn her. We got to get her gone because she has sinned before the Lord. She has obviously committed adultery, and she comes and she's so clever and wise. And I love how God uses even creativity. She says, well, the one that gave me this child owns the staff and seal. And all of a sudden he realized he was the jerk. He had done the wrong thing before the Lord, and he was repentant. He said, oh no, this is bad news. I did the wrong thing. You are righteous. He declared her righteous, even for her action. And so it's amazing that in the story that is so, wow. I mean, would you even be able to go to the theater and buy the ticket for this? You'd be ducking because if someone from church saw you to see a movie like this, you'd be like, oh gosh, this is naughty. I don't want to be caught. This is so scandalous. And yet this baby, right? Babies. So she's pregnant with twins. Now, the Bible tells us in Genesis 38 that he never slept with her again, but she brought forth 2 children. And it's so amazing the way that it happened is that these 2 babies were being born, and one baby punches a hand out. Now, if you're a midwife, this is going to be cool to you. You're like, what? Baby punched his hands out. So the nurse ties a scarlet cord around the baby's hand, but then the baby pulled his hand back in. That's kind of crazy. I can't even imagine that. I've had babies, but that's weird. Anyway, so the baby's hand goes back in, and the nurse said, it's breakout. So they named him Breakout, which in Hebrew really is Perez, because Breakout would be a weird name. But Perez is his name. And then his brother came out. So Perez was not the threaded kid. He busted out before his brother with the thread. So the second kid came out with the thread on his hand. His name is Zerah. Now, we're going to find out that Perez is going to be the one that brings the lineage of Jesus. So Judah married this Canaanite woman. His boys were only half Israeli. Tamar was a Jewess. So Judah's Jewish, Tamar's Jewess. By God's providence, this spunky lady actually preserved the pure family line. And Tamar teaches us that our greatest adversities can turn into God's greatest blessings. I love Tamar because of her spunkiness, even in a hard place, even with the reproach of being a widow, awful. The reproach of even having to do what she had to do. Bad news, but God had this beautiful thread all along to bring redemption, to bring his story through her story. Now, she pretended to be a prostitute, right? So let's follow the scarlet cord to our next bad girl. And I'm telling you, this chick is so bad. This next bad girl is so bad, you will not even believe it. She's so bad to the bone. Stacy's going to tell you about her.
I tell you what, this could have been for sure, this is probably where they got James Bond 007. I am a Bond fan. I love it. Now, we're going to be talking about Rahab. This girl was something. So Rahab, we find Rahab in Joshua, and Rahab was a woman of the night. Get my drift? She was a businesswoman, and this businesswoman made a business, can you believe it? She made a business of a house of ill repute. Cat house. People in the South would call it a cat house. So here is this woman who is the prostitute, who owns a business in the town of Jericho, and she was a pagan. So she's doing what she knows to do. She is one who is worshiping other gods. She is wicked and evil. Everyone in the town of Jericho knew. So can you imagine if we had a cat house in Jericho? Everyone would know. They'd be driving by, oh man, that's Rahab's house. You'd be seeing men going in and men coming out. Oh, what? Yep, everyone would know. That's where she is. And everyone knew that's what was happening there. Well, lo and behold, in comes 2 James Bond 007. They walk in her house. They're spies. Now, if you don't know the story is this. The Israelites come out of Egypt. I'm going to tell you real quick. Go into Joshua, read the story. They come out of Egypt. Moses dies, but before he dies, God shows him the land that he's promised. And he said, you're not going to get to enter it, but you're going to send Joshua, and they are going to enter in. So Moses dies. Up comes the new leader, Joshua. Joshua says to the men, I want you to go spy out the land. Go everywhere, especially go to Jericho. So here goes the two spies. They're going out. They're checking out the land. Now, in my research, I thought this was great. Did you know that the people of Jericho, their lineage, they were the last people, did you know this, Heather? Of the giants. Oh my God. Do you know when they come back and they go, we can't go in there, we can't go in there, there's giants in the land. Those were the giants. They were the last of that kind. And I thought, wow. So here come the 007s into Rahab's house of ill repute. They probably went there because they were smart. And they were like, nobody will know we're in here. They'll not even look that we're here. So they come in, and because she's so well known, people of the town watch, and they see these 2 gentlemen walking in, and they know, hey, these guys aren't from Jericho. They must be from Burlington. They gotta be. So they send word to the king. Well, they were for sure that these were spies coming to spy the land. And they were right. So the king sends a message to Rahab.
well, hello. And he says, hey, we hear you got spies in here. Well, before that, there was something spectacular that happened in the midst. Can I just say this by the Spirit of God? When we have the very presence, the very essence of the living God inside of us, wherever we go, we bring him. So when they walked into the cat house, guess who they brought with them? And they walk up, and they meet this woman. You're not her, I'm pretending. They meet this woman, and because of the, come on, hear me now. Because of the presence of God, they didn't say a word. Now remember, they're spies, 007, James Bond. Well, hello. There's this that happens. Nobody said a word, but Rahab had an encounter with the living God in that moment. She knows who they are. They're spies. She rushes them to the top of the roof, and she hides them under the flax. Now, she was a businesswoman. She had the cat house, but she also had flax up there to make linen. Now, if you know the process of making flax, it's disgusting, making it out to make it material. You lay it in some muck and water, and it's stagnant, and it's gross, and she hid them underneath a blanket that had all the muck and the smell and the disgustingness in it, and they went underneath in there. They're underneath. She hid them. That's disgusting. The smell. They're spies. Nobody can know they're there. So she hides them up there, Heather. So we know they're here. And she's like, well, you know what? There were 2 men that came, but they left. She just lied. Oh, my goodness. So she tells them that they left, and they went out the gate over there, and you need to run and go quick to find them. So they leave. She goes back up there. Now let's go to the scripture. Did you bring your Bibles? Ha, bet you thought you'd get out of it. So we're going to go to Joshua 2. So we're going to go down to verse 9. 8. Before the spies lay down for the night, she went up to the roof and said to them, I know that the Lord has given this land to you, and that great fear of you has fallen on us. You see, the people in Jericho knew what the Israelites knew what Joshua was doing. They knew of the God, the great I am. So the fear has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did at Shalon and Og, the 2 kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts melted, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is the God in heaven above and on the earth below. Come on. Nobody told her. There was this moment of revelation and awakening in this woman who was a pagan, who did not love God, who did not worship God, who did things, bad things, and didn't care. But she had this encounter with the presence that they ushered in with them. And she says, your God, he is the God in heaven above and on the earth. Now, then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I've shown kindness to you. Now, it's all right there, and you read it for yourself, but this woman was smart. She had this encounter, and she went, oh, I'm going to hide you because I know your God is the God of heaven and the God on the earth. But you know what? I'm going to get something out of this. And I'm going to ask that you show kindness and favor for me and my family. So her mother and father, brothers and sisters, whoever she had in her clan, she was making a deal. She didn't let them just go off of that. They said, tie a red scarlet rope out your window, and we're going to know that everyone in that house is going to be spared. And they said back to her, you give me your word, and you're not going to tell where we are or what we're doing, then we promise that we will make right. But we can't promise you if your Uncle Johnny's out roaming the roads of Jericho when we come, too bad. You need to be in the house. So, they take off. They come back. You know the story. They march around Jericho. Can you imagine? People inside knowing full on what God had done to others and destroyed them. That God was coming to destroy an evil, adulterous city. Talk about fear maybe coming down on those people. They heard it and heard it and heard it and heard it until the walls came crumbling down. People in her home, Heather, were saved. So let's look at this word. Here she is, being saved. So she says, I'm going to go back to their agreed, she said. Let it be as you say. So she sent, I'm in verse 21. So she sent them away, and they departed, and she tied the scarlet cord in the window. And when they left, they went into the hills, and they stayed there for 3 days until the pursuers had searched all along the road without finding them. When the two men started back, they went out of the hills, forged the river, and came to Joshua, son of Nun, and told him everything that had happened. And they said to Joshua, surely the Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us. Early in the morning, Joshua and all the Israelites set out, and they are crossing the Jordan. So we hear that they come. Consecrate yourselves, he's saying. We're going in and we're taking that land. And so we see here, they take the land, and then here's what happens. They take her and her family, and they usher them out. And they go and live with the land, with the Israelites. Now, here's something that happens. Here's the point. Here's the beautiful, beautiful, beautiful point. Here is a wicked, wicked girl. Wicked girl. Prostitute. She has this encounter. She realizes there is a God, the one true God, whom I'm going to serve. She leaves with her family. And see, the Bible doesn't tell us too much more about her except for this. You know, those James Bond that came in. One was named Salmon, not the fish. So, he's the spy that came into her house. Guess what? He married her. He married her. She comes out of a place of brokenness and barrenness. She comes out of a place of pain and hurt. In her desert place, God said, there's destiny. There's redemption. And God turned her life around and transformed her into a woman who went along with her husband, 007, and ministered to the Lord. Served God with all her heart, mind, and soul. And guess what, Heather? That was in the Old Testament. The New Testament in Hebrews says this. She was so famous. It says this, Hebrews 11:31. By faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient because of her faith. James 2:24-26 says this, you see that a person is justified by what he does and not by faith alone. In the same way, was not the prostitute considered righteous for what she did when she gave lodging to the spies and sent them off in a different direction? As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead. A woman of the night, the Lord called her a heroine of faith. A man named Solomon gladly called her his wife. Our amazing sister Rahab, a former prostitute who was decidedly bad for a season, but not forever. Radical revelation from God awakened a broken woman who was willing to let God use her to bring about his purpose, not just in her life, but in the lives of others. Let's take a look at this video.
Abraham had Isaac, Isaac he had Jacob, Jacob he had Judah and his kin. Well, then Perez and Zerah came from Judah's woman Tamar. Perez he brought Hezron up, and then came Aram, then Amminadab, then Nahshon, who was then the dad of Salmon, who with Rahab fathered Boaz. Ruth she married Boaz, who had Obed, who had Jesse. Jesse he had David, who we know as king. David he had Solomon by dead Uriah's wife. Solomon, well, you all knew him. He had good old Rehoboam, followed by Abijah, who had Asa. Asa had Jehoshaphat, had Joram, had Isaiah, who had Jotham, then Ahaz, then Hezekiah. Followed by Manasseh, who had Amon, who was Aman, who was father of a good boy named Josiah. Grandfather Jehoiakim, who caused the Babylonian captivity because he was a liar. And then he had Shealtiel, who begat Zerubbabel, who had Abiud, who had Eliakim. Eliakim had Ezer, who had Zadok, who had Achim. Achim was the father of Eliab. Then he had Eliezer, who had Mathan, who had Jacob. Listen very closely, I don't want to sing this twice. Jacob was the father of Joseph, husband of Mary, mother of Christ.
Wow. What a lineage. What a tree. And can you believe it? We were talking about this when we were studying these women, how it's amazing that in this lineage of who Jesus is, in this line, God took broken people. He didn't take the good, I knew the word, I'm righteous. No. Prostitutes. Scandalous people. And he took these people and he transformed their hearts and their lives. And in this beautiful line of lineage came a son. Woo! Ruth. Did you see her in there? She's in there. So we're going to go to the book of Ruth. It's in the Old Testament, if you don't know. It's right next to Judges. This is for sure, could have been a movie. They probably made it. And the movie could have been made in Manhattan. Anyone's seen it? I've seen it. But Ruth was, she was a Moabite, a pagan. Again, she was a pagan. Now, the Moabites, this religion that they were in was detestable. They sacrificed babies. The sexual sin and the paganism, you want to talk about horrendous, XXX, bad. Now, keep in mind that God, in this time frame, was constantly crying out to these people and wanting them to transform their hearts and live the way that God had called us to live. He was always crying out to a rebellious nation, saying, if you would turn from your wicked way and follow me, I will bless your land. But these people were obstinate, defiant, and disobedient. You know why? Because they loved themselves. They loved doing what they did. They loved the satisfaction that they got, and it was all about me. Sound familiar? Happens today. All about me. So let's look at Ruth. Ruth was a young girl that married into a family of Israelites, of people who loved God. But the father of this family, the word says, he was one of those, yeah, I come to church on Sunday. And when he left the house, walked out of church, his walk didn't show it. So here's what happens. She marries into this family, so she becomes to understand and know who God is. And so what happens here is that the father and the two sons, they die. And so here's Naomi with her two daughter-in-laws. They're penniless. They don't have anything anymore. And there's famine in the land. And they don't have anywhere to go. So now we see here in Ruth chapter 1 that the husbands died. I'm going to go down to verse 6. When she heard in Moab that the Lord, now the husbands died, so they're trying to decide, what are we going to do? When they heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of the people by providing food for them, Naomi and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. Now home was Bethlehem in Judah. So they get ready, and they are getting ready to go. And then Naomi says to her daughters, hey, you know what, girls, I'm a widow. I don't have anything. Your husbands have died. I don't have any other sons that can take that place. And I'm an old woman. And even if I did have a child, are you going to wait around until that child's old enough for you to marry? They'd probably be really old ladies. And so it was kind of foolish. Like, she's like, please, I don't want to hold you, go back to your families. So the one daughter-in-law decided, okay, I'm going to go back. But here's Ruth. Now, please keep in mind how Ruth was brought up in a pagan world. So here's Ruth. Here's her response. Naomi says, return home. And then Ruth says, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Wherever you go, I will go. And where you stay, I will stay. And your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I die. And there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you and me. Wow. Talk about a young woman having a mother-in-love. This was not just a mother-in-law. This was a mother-in-love. She loved her. Naomi showed her who God was. There was, just like Rahab, a moment in Ruth's life where there was this transformation. There was an understanding of this life living in paganism and all these detestable things. Ruth was saying, I don't want to have part of. I'm going where you go. I'm sticking with you. So they leave and they go. And so they get there, and she has no money. She has nothing. Now, we need to understand the widows in this time when you were a widow, and especially a young one, and they were penniless. So they were the low of the low. So Naomi says this. Ruth comes to her and says, hey, she's like, can I just go glean in the fields? Can I follow the harvesters and go behind and pick up what is left, and then we'll have some food? And Naomi is saying, yes, go ahead. Did you hear what I just said? She asked her mother-in-law if she could do this. Most of us would be like, man, I'm going down the field. Come on. Look at her heart. She submits herself to her mother-in-law and asks, would it be okay? Right? So she goes down to the field, and she's beginning to go along, and she picks. And she's like, hopefully I'm going to find favor in someone's eyes. So she begins to glean it, and she found herself working in a field belonging to a man called Boaz, who is from the clan of Naomi's husband. Now, Boaz was a wealthy and influential man in Bethlehem. He was probably in our day and time very rich, very well known businessman, was a man of integrity and character. So she's in this field. She finds herself there. So in comes Boaz, checking out things. He comes to his main guy, the manager of his field, and he's like, wait a minute. Who's that girl back there? And the guy's like, oh, that's Naomi's daughter-in-law, the widow, Ruth. She asked if she could glean in the field behind. Now, she's behind the servant girls. So there's a bunch of servant girls that are picking and gleaning, and Ruth is behind them, picking up what's left. So Boaz, okay. She's there. And so she's asked us if she can go. And so Boaz calls her over. And he says, we're going to go into Ruth 2. We're looking at verse 8. So Boaz said to Ruth, my daughter, listen, don't go and glean in any other field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with my servant girls. Watch the field where the men are harvesting and follow along after the girls. Listen to what he says. I've told the men not to touch you. And whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars that the men have filled. At this, she bows down her face to the ground, and she says, thank you. Why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me? I'm a foreigner. I'm nothing. Now, two things I want us to see right there. He says, stay here. I've told the men not to touch you. There's protection over her. How many of you know, back in the day, well, even 2017, things happen. Men back in the day would have maybe taken advantage of her and had their way with her. But Boaz said, I have commanded my men not to touch you. Stay right here. And if you're thirsty, go to the water jars that the men filled. Protection and water. He's taking care of her. So, she's gleaning the field. So even this, then he says, she takes off and she goes into the field, and this is what I love. He goes to the manager. He's like, she's going out there. You know what? She might not look like what she knows what to do. She's maybe never done this before. So if she should glean or pick from the place she's not supposed to be picking, don't embarrass her. Tell the guys not to embarrass her. In fact, tell the guys to pull some of the sheaves, pull some of that out, and just leave it for her when she comes up. Come on. He's like, don't embarrass her. She might not know what she's doing or how we do things. And he's providing for her. She doesn't know it, but he's covering her. So she's out there gleaning. She's so excited. She runs home to Naomi. Look at everything I got. Look at this. And Naomi's like, what? Whose field are you gleaning in? And how is this going? And she's like, it's Boaz. Oh. Did you see the mother-in-law? Light bulb goes on. Oh. Did you know, Ruth, that he is one of our kinsman redeemers? Now you might say, what is that? What is a kinsman redeemer? So back in that time, a kinsman redeemer is a male relative, according to various laws of that they had. They had the privilege and responsibility to act on behalf of a relative who was in trouble or danger or in need. The Hebrew term goel for kinsman redeemer designates one who delivers or rescues or redeems property or a person. The kinsman redeemer redeems or vindicates a relative, and we see that clearly illustrated here in this story. So Naomi's like, he is our kinsman redeemer. So here's what happened. She tells Ruth this. She goes, I want you to go take a bath, get nice clean clothes on, maybe put some essential oil on, and do your hair and look nice. And now I want you to go to the threshing floor, and I want you to lay at Boaz's feet. What? Ruth didn't say what. She wouldn't be like, huh? Now, mind you, Ruth, young woman, Boaz, old man. Probably not too hunky. Maybe chunky. So, she's obedient. She goes. And this is scandalous. Come on, stay with me here. She goes in, and it's night, and he's sleeping at the threshing floor, and she lays down, and she takes the bottom of his clothing up to show his feet. The Bible says, read it in Ruth. And she lays at his feet. Hopefully they weren't stinky. She's laying there. Now, you'd be like, what? What does that mean? Did you, like, scandalous. You know what she was doing? She's saying to him, I want you to take me as your wife. She's proposing marriage. So he wakes up, he feels something down there. Maybe someone tickled his feet. Maybe it's the Holy Spirit, it was God waking him up. Ruth, what are you doing here? So he's like, all right, before everyone's up, she gets up and he knows what she means, and he's like, okay, but there's a kinsman redeemer that's closer than I, so let me take care of this, and I'll get back to you. Now she's got to go home and have a cup of coffee. So she goes home, tells her mother-in-law. Mother-in-law says, oh, Ruth, don't worry. He's going to go take care of it, and we'll know by the end of the day what his word is. So here, I'm going to fast forward this. He goes to the guy that's closer than him, a relative, and he says to him, hey, Naomi's selling her land, and you're the closest, so I want you to know about this first. What do you think? You want to do it? And the guy's like, oh, yeah, I want the land. And then Boaz is like, well, you take Ruth, her daughter-in-law, as your wife also with the land. It's part of the deal. He's like, no way. I'm not doing that. I don't know. It's going to mess up his whole plan. He's like, I'm not having that. How do we even know that sometimes God has a plan and he does things in ways that we don't understand? Come on. And so Boaz is like, oh yeah, really? Okay. So here's what they did. He's like, give me your shoe. This is what they did. They didn't sign no contract back in the day. They handed each other a shoe. That was the deal. You hand me your shoe, I hand you my shoe. Done deal. Right then and there, he says, hello, folks. I'm here today to tell you that I am purchasing the land from Naomi, and I am marrying Ruth, her daughter-in-law, and I want everyone to know. So he's telling this to everyone. He's making it known. Got the shoe. Done deal. So guess what? He marries Ruth. He marries this woman. And so you might go, well, what is so fabulous about this? What is so bad about her? Well, here again was this pagan woman who had this encounter with God, who said, I'm going to leave the land that I knew, that I once lived. Woo! Come on. I'm going to leave this life of sin, and I'm going to walk away. And I'm going to walk into a land that God promised. And I don't know how he's going to do it, but I know my God's going to provide. And she finds favor, and she finds favor. And here's the beautiful part right here. Ruth had a destiny in her desert place, and she was willing to step out and touch into truth and love and faith and redemption. She boldly came to the threshing room. She boldly came, now hear me, she boldly came to the throne. She went into the bride's chambers, and she laid at his feet, asking, would you marry me? Would you redeem who I am? God gave us his son, who we can boldly go into his chambers and say, and fall at his feet and say, as wicked as I am, would you redeem me? Would you love me? Would you protect me? Woo! What a beautiful story of a kinsman redeemer. Bad girl. Now, you think Rahab and Tamar and Ruth were bad? This next one, she wasn't squeaky clean. By no way.
Not even at all. Wow. So Stacy's two girls were pagans, and my two girls were Jewish. So it's interesting that God is using everyone. My chosen, my adopted, my brought in. So Tamar was barren and broken. God did a thing in her life. It's so amazing to see that. And so my girl, her name is Bathsheba, heavy on the bath. Y'all know who she is? Yeah? No? You should. If you watch VeggieTales, you totally do. I know Jen Broder does, except her name is not Broder anymore, it's Blanchett. So, Bathsheba, that's right. You can find her in the Bible if you have it still out. So she's in Matthew 1, as we saw in that video. She's also in 2 Samuel 11. And she's pretty famous. I mean, she's a pretty solid girl. People know who she is. She's a dish. She's a smoking hottie. You know what I'm talking about? She's a Jewess of high prestige, married to a resident alien. What? A Hittite? He's not even a Jewish dude. He's not, what? Yeah, and he's like the ruler of David's army. He's a pretty cool cat. So he is a faithful servant to David. His name's Uriah. and he was respected. And as we can see in Scripture, so was Bathsheba. So they were respected and pretty well off. They lived close to the castle, close enough that from the castle or the palace, you could look into their home. And that's where we find our story. Now, to preface this, in 2 Samuel 11:1, then it happened in the spring at the time when kings go out to battle, that David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they destroyed the sons of Ammon and besieged Rabbah. But David stayed in Jerusalem. Problem number one. That man was made for battle, and he stayed home. Bad news bears. Additionally, he's napping in the middle of the afternoon, which I do not understand who gets to do this, because I try to take naps at my desk and I get in trouble. So I don't know, but somehow he got the right to take. So he's taking a nap in the afternoon. And it says in 2 Samuel 11:2-5, when late afternoon David got up from taking his nap, was strolling on the roof of the palace, and from his vantage point on the roof, he saw a woman bathing. Now, she was stunningly beautiful. It's neat. Bathsheba's name means daughter of oath. And as we've heard this thread, this scarlet line, we keep hearing about oaths and promises and covenants. God is so incredibly creative, even in that people's names were so symbolic of something that mattered so much. So she's stunningly beautiful. David sent to ask about her and was told, isn't this Bathsheba, daughter of Eliam and wife of Uriah the Hittite? And David sent his agents to get her. What? After she arrived, he went to bed with her. Then she returned home, and before long, she realized she was pregnant. Uh-oh. What's up with this? These crisis pregnancy stories. Wow, it's amazing. So later she sent word to David and said, I'm pregnant. Somebody grab a bottle, fill it up with change for her. So anyway, she sounds to me a little bit like a floozy, but she was naked and viewable. I mean, I won't even go there about my personal life, but I'm just saying that typically you should not walk around naked and exposed for your neighbors to see. And if you do, it could end up being bad news bears for you, because it could end up resulting in things you wouldn't want. So anyway, she's naked and viewable, exposed, right? And what in the heck is she thinking? So as a result of her nakedness, she's summoned by the king. Now, there's a part of me that wonders, is she like, ooh, this is an opportunity to get ahead? I don't know. I mean, the Bible doesn't really tell us where she's at in her thinking necessarily, right? We know that it happened, and she couldn't refuse to come to the king. She had, I mean, we saw with Vashti, that did not work out, except it did for Esther. But she really, I mean, she's brought to David. So that's not necessarily as much a choice. However, when she's brought to the king, is this an unfortunate consequence? Well, I would say not necessarily fully unfortunate, but what she did do is she didn't say no. And no could have meant banishment. It could have meant embarrassment for her husband of high rank. It could have meant all kinds of economic loss. Ultimately, saying no might have cost her everything, including her life. Yet, she did have a choice. She did have a choice to say yes or no, but it could have cost everything. And I know sometimes in our situations, it costs us everything to make the right decision, even if the result is, we'd like it to come out a little more flowery. So her story is one of betrayal, adultery, murder. This is like a soap opera, guys. This is insane. It's actually in the Bible, blows my mind. And as a result, David has her husband knocked off. Literally, David tries to trick Uriah to come and have relationship with his wife so that nobody knows where that baby came from. Well, guess what? Uriah was so honorable and so dedicated to the king, so committed, so sold out, he refused. He said, no way, I will not do this. I am in a time of war. So David fed him and got him drunk even and still tried to send him to his wife. he refused. He slept with his men in their barracks or probably camping, and he would not go home to his wife because he felt like that was disloyalty. And that to me speaks so loudly. So he refuses to. Now David's in big, big trouble because nobody is going to rise up to be the father of this baby in that situation. And then this is going to literally, God punishes this family. It's not like, I mean, the story ends up great, but it also still has trouble in it. And you can read more about that. But the family of David never really recovered. Nathan the prophet proclaimed that the sword would never leave his house because of this infidelity and murder. Now, it's interesting because in the situation with Bathsheba, she has the baby is coming, right? What are you going to do? You're pregnant and the baby's coming. So Uriah the Hittite, he gets sent to the front of battle and he gets killed. And David's like, oh, well, okay, now I can take her as a wife. But Nathan the prophet just does not let him off the hook. So he does take Bathsheba, calls her to the palace. She becomes a wife. She has this baby, but the baby dies. And this is so hard, but the Bible actually says that God permitted this. God was involved in this because that baby represented everything of disaster, of sin, and of wrongness. And so David and Bathsheba mourned. They wept. They were very devastated. First, they prayed. They repented. And the cool thing, backing up just a little bit, is that in the story, they both had a heart for God. David was called a man after God's own heart. His heart repented. Her heart was repentant as well. And they were sad that this had become the result. But God then, after this baby dies and they mourn together, it says David came to his wife Bathsheba and she became pregnant again with a son. And this son is Solomon, the one who wrote so many Ecclesiastes, the wisest man to ever live, a direct upline to Jesus's story. It's phenomenal. He's a king, and we hear such incredible things. The book of Proverbs and all of the wise sayings and the Song of Solomon. If you want to, when I was a Baptist kid, they told us in church we weren't permitted to read the Song of Solomon. So guess what I did? I was like, I am going to read this book. I was like 10 years old. And I was blown away. I almost blushed. It was so incredible. So anyway, out of the story, though, some people think Bathsheba was just innocent and just a victim. But I don't think that we're ever a victim, really. I think that we are in situations and we have a choice, and then God redeems. He redeems. He takes our bad decision. He takes the bad consequences sometimes that happen to us that we didn't decide, and he redeems so much. It's so incredible. And I know that that's part of my story. God has redeemed so much. Now, God, I think he just loves these bad girls so much so that we hear about them in the Word. Matthew honors them. When he's writing his genealogies, he writes about these tainted women that they were like, by their birth outside of Israel or their former occupations, their behaviors, and their professions. But a single step toward God, a brave faith opportunity seized forever, changed the course of their lives, and it puts them all in the direct scarlet thread that leads to Jesus. So God does not care where we came from. He is not worried about our past mistakes at all, but he offers forgiveness and he offers hope. He doesn't care what we were, but who we become and who he is making us.
You see, it isn't who you were that matters to God. It's who you are in him and who you are becoming by the power of his Holy Spirit. Will you just stand with us? Come on up here, Heather. Now you see, there's a purpose in the stories of these women that we have in this beautiful book of the Bible that God has given us. And all of these women were willing to let God use them in their brokenness. Some you're going to find were nameless and known. Some were barren and broken, childish and chosen. In their desert place, there was destiny in their desert place. Some were selfless and supernatural, but each one had a choice to make. Now, you might be standing here today understanding where you came from. I was a broken human being going to hell. And there was an encounter that happened. A love encounter. You see, God loved the people. No matter how rebellious and obstinate they were, he kept fighting, and he's still fighting and intercessing and praying for us today that we would make a choice to step out in faith, to believe his word, and to walk in a way that is pleasing and holy to him. And so we're going to have some time of prayer and ministry. And if you are going, God, you know my heart. Maybe there have been some things that have been distracting you. Idolatry. Idolatry is loving other gods. 2017, it could be the television. It could be your sports. It could be whatever it is that's causing you to not take the time to be with the one true God that loves you. And you know. So if there's something in your heart and you want to lay it down, God says, come. You are a beautiful people. God loves you. Aren't you so glad that God takes our brokenness? If we're willing, he takes it. He takes that brokenness. And so here's our encouragement to you. Are you willing to take that step? Just as I talked about Pastor Mary this morning, I'm telling you, body, we would not be here to where God's bringing us hadn't it been for a woman who said, I'm broken beyond despair, but you, God. So if you want to meet with the Lord, they're gonna cue up some music. You come meet, the elders can come, we can pray. You be blessed as you go. We love you. Come back next week because we got some more bad girls.